The most composed man you've ever met never raises his voice. Not because he's afraid to. You'll watch him sit through an accusation that would make most people's blood boil, and his face won't move. You'll watch someone try to bait him into an argument in front of a room full of people, hoping for some flicker of weakness they can use later, and he'll simply look at them, say nothing, and let the silence do something words never could. You've felt unsettled around someone like this before, not because they were threatening, because you couldn't read them, couldn't predict them, couldn't get a single reaction out of them to confirm you'd landed a hit. And somewhere underneath that unsettled feeling was something closer to envy, a quiet wish that you, too, could move through conflict like that, untouched. You assumed this kind of stillness was a personality trait, something rare, something people are either born with or simply don't have, a gift handed to a select few, while the rest of us are stuck reacting to every provocation life throws at us. You haven't yet understood that it isn't a gift at all. It's a discipline, one that can be built deliberately, point by point, the same way anything else worth having is built through repetition, through failure, through the slow accumulation of small refusals. Nearly 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius governed the most powerful empire on earth while surrounded by men actively trying to provoke him into mistakes. Political rivals hoping he'd react emotionally and expose a weakness they could exploit later. Generals testing whether public pressure could rattle a composure that, if cracked even once, would be remembered for the rest of his reign. Court officials manufacturing small humiliations, subtle slights, manufactured insults, just to study what would happen. He understood something that most people spend their entire lives never grasping, that the moment you react, you hand someone information about exactly how to control you. You teach them what hurts, what works, what to repeat. He did not become legendary for his armies, though they were formidable. He became legendary for what almost nobody could ever extract from him. A single, unguarded reaction, a flicker of panic, a moment where the mask came off and the man underneath revealed himself to be exactly as manipulable as everyone else. What follows are 7 things this kind of person simply does not do. 7 refusals that, taken together, build something most people spend a lifetime chasing without ever fully reaching it. Pay close attention to the 5th one. It looks like weakness in the exact moment it's happening, and it is actually the most psychologically devastating move on this entire list, the one that ends conflicts other people are still trying to win. The first thing he never does, he never argues to be understood by someone who has already decided not to understand him. You've done this more times than you'd like to admit. Spent 20 minutes, sometimes longer, explaining your side of something to someone who walked into the conversation with their mind already closed, hoping that one more sentence, one more piece of context, one more carefully chosen example would finally make them see it your way. It never does. You can feel it happening even as you're speaking the words, landing somewhere short of their target, bouncing off a decision that was made before you opened your mouth. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the effort to be understood by an unwilling mind is breath spent on a door that was never going to open, no matter how precisely you knock. This composed figure understands something you're only beginning to grasp, that arguing with someone determined to misunderstand you isn't persuasion. It's begging, dressed up in the language of logic, hoping the right words will finally earn what should never have required earning in the first place. This is not a flaw in your intelligence or a failure of your argument. It is simply a battle that was rigged before you ever walked into the room. The second thing he never does, he never explains a decision to someone who has no actual stake in the outcome. Notice how often you justify your choices to people whose opinion costs you absolutely nothing if you choose to ignore it. A distant relative who hears about your decision secondhand and has an opinion anyway. A former friend who stopped being part of your daily life years ago, but somehow still feels entitled to weigh in. A stranger online, faceless and consequence-free, typing judgment into a comment section they'll forget by tomorrow. Marcus Aurelius called this surrendering your authority to an audience that was never granted a vote in the first place, handing the keys to people who have nothing invested in the outcome, but everything invested in having an opinion. This composed figure has quietly drawn a line most people never think to draw, because drawing it requires admitting that not every voice deserves a response. Explanation is owed only to those who share the weight of the outcome alongside you. Everyone else gets a decision, not a justification, not a defense, not a single additional word. This is not arrogance dressed up as confidence. It is simply refusing to pay a tax that was never actually required of you. The third thing he never does, he never lets his face confirm whether a comment hit its target. This one is harder than it sounds, because the urge to react is almost involuntary, wired in long before conscious thought has time to intervene. Someone says something cutting, something precisely aimed at an insecurity they've clearly studied, and your face wants to flinch, your jaw wants to tighten. Some small visible signal wants to escape before you can stop it. The eyes widen for half a second, the mouth tightens almost imperceptibly, and in that half second, the person watching gets exactly what they came for: confirmation. Marcus Aurelius wrote about training the body to remain undisturbed even when the mind underneath is genuinely affected, because a visible reaction is the only proof an attacker actually needs to know their aim was true. This composed figure has practiced the art of an unreadable face the way other people practice anything they take seriously, deliberately, repeatedly, until what was once an effort becomes second nature. Not because nothing affects him anymore, because he has simply refused, again and again, to let his face confirm what does. The fourth thing he never does, he never competes for the last word. You know this trap intimately, because almost everyone falls into it at some point. The conversation should have ended 3 exchanges ago. The point has been made, understood, perhaps even agreed upon in substance, and still something in you needs to add one more comment, one more correction, one more clever rebuttal to make absolutely certain you weren't the one who seemed to lose. Marcus Aurelius observed that the compulsive need for the final word is often nothing more than ego wearing the disguise of clarity, dressing up a simple desire to win as a noble pursuit of accuracy. This composed figure has made peace with something most people never reconcile themselves to: letting someone else believe they won an exchange that was never actually a competition to him in the first place. There is no trophy waiting at the end of a conversation. There is no scoreboard keeping track of who spoke last. There is only the quiet relief that belongs to someone who has finally stopped needing to keep score at all. The fifth thing he never does, and this is the one that looks like weakness while it's happening. He never defends his character to someone actively trying to destroy it. This feels unbearable in the moment it's required of you. Every instinct in your body screams to correct the record immediately, to list your good qualities one by one, to produce evidence, witnesses, history, anything that might prove the accusation false before it has the chance to spread or settle into someone's mind as fact. But watch closely what actually happens when someone defends themselves too hard, too fast, too desperately, too completely. It reads as guilt, even when there is none to find. The frantic energy of the defense becomes its own kind of evidence, regardless of what's actually true underneath it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man who must constantly prove his own virtue has already lost something far more valuable than the argument in front of him: his composure, his center. the steady ground he was supposed to be standing on. This composed figure has learned the counterintuitive truth that the strongest possible response to a false accusation is often the complete absence of a frantic one. Silence here is not surrender, and it is not weakness pretending to be strength. It is the refusal to dignify a destruction attempt with the exact energy it came hunting for. The sixth thing he never does, he never reveals his next move to someone who has already shown him their envy. You've made this mistake before, probably more than once. Excited about a plan, a goal, a change you were finally ready to make, and you shared it eagerly with someone whose face, in hindsight, didn't quite match the words of support coming out of their mouth. A slight tightness around the eyes. A congratulations that arrived a beat too late. A question that sounded supportive on the surface, but somehow managed to find the one weak point in your plan and press on it. Marcus Aurelius understood that envy disguises itself remarkably well as interest, as friendship, as genuine curiosity about your progress, and that sharing your intentions with the wrong audience hands them a head start on undermining you before you've even truly begun. This composed figure has learned to let actions speak first and explanations follow later, if at all, sometimes not, until the result is already standing in plain sight, impossible to argue with. This is not secrecy born from paranoia or distrust of everyone around him. It is simply protecting momentum from the specific people who have already shown you clearly what they do with information about your success. The seventh thing he never does, he never stays in a conversation after the conversation has already ended. This is the one most people miss entirely, because it doesn't announce itself the way the others do. A discussion can be technically still happening, words still being exchanged back and forth, long after its actual purpose has quietly died somewhere in the middle of it. One side is still talking, still pushing, still circling the same point from a slightly different angle, because they need a different outcome than the one that has already arrived, a different reaction, a different concession, a different ending than the one reality has already settled on. Marcus Aurelius wrote about recognizing the precise moment when continuing to engage no longer serves truth or understanding, only ego and the stubborn refusal to accept what has already been decided. This composed figure can feel that moment the instant it happens, almost like a shift in temperature in the room, and he simply leaves. Not dramatically, not announced with a speech about how this conversation is over, just gone, calmly, while the other person is often still mid-sentence. Walking away mid-conversation isn't rudeness, and it isn't a failure to finish what was started. It's recognizing that some conversations end the moment one side stops listening, regardless of how many more words get spoken after that point. All 7 of these behaviors trace back to a single psychological principle Marcus Aurelius understood with unusual clarity for his time, and which modern psychology has only recently caught up to in different language. Every reaction you give someone is information. Every explanation, every heated defense, every desperate argument hands the other person data about exactly what controls you, what wounds you, what specific lever they can pull to get a predictable response out of you the next time they need one. Most people leak this information constantly without ever realizing they're doing it, simply because reacting feels like the only natural response to provocation, the only proof that you're paying attention, that you care, that you're not simply ignoring an injustice. But provocation only works on a system that responds. It only succeeds when the target plays the role they were assigned. The moment you stop responding in the expected, predictable way, the entire mechanism designed to control you quietly collapses in on itself, because it was built entirely on the assumption that you'd play along the way you always had before. So here is how you begin building this in yourself, starting today, not someday. First, before you explain a decision to anyone, ask whether the person asking actually shares any real consequence of that decision alongside you. If they don't, the explanation is optional, not owed, and you are allowed to simply not offer it. Second, when you feel the sudden urge to defend your character against an accusation, pause for 3 full seconds before saying a single word, and notice how often that small pause alone changes what eventually comes out of your mouth. Third, stop sharing your next move, your next plan, your next ambition with anyone whose support has ever felt even slightly hollow in the past. Let the result speak for itself when it's finally ready to. Fourth, practice letting someone else have the last word in low-stakes conversations, deliberately, on purpose, specifically to break the compulsive need to win every single exchange you find yourself in. Fifth, the next time a conversation has clearly ended in substance, even if it hasn't ended in volume, be the one who leaves first, calmly, without ceremony. The goal here is not to become numb to people, distant from everyone around you, or incapable of real, genuine connection. The goal is to stop handing your composure over to anyone who hasn't earned the right to take it from you in the first place. Weak minds need every accusation answered immediately, every silence filled with something, every slight avenged with the perfect cutting response. Strong minds understand something most people never arrive at, that most provocations are simply invitations to a fight that will cost you far more than it could ever cost the person who started it. You are not required to explain yourself to people who never intended to listen in the first place. You are not required to defend a character that, over enough time, speaks clearly for itself without your help. You are not required to remain in any room, any conversation, any relationship that has already revealed its true purpose was never mutual respect to begin with. Never arguing is not the same as having nothing left to say. Never explaining is not the same as having nothing worth explaining. And walking away calmly, without wasting a single unnecessary word on your way out, is sometimes the loudest thing you will ever do in front of people who were certain you'd stay and fight. If this changed how you see your own reactions, subscribe to Ancient Mindset. This channel exists for people who want to understand Stoic philosophy, the psychology of self-control, the silent strategies that separate composed minds from reactive ones, and the quiet discipline required to stop handing your power away one explanation at a time. Marcus Aurelius did not master this overnight, and neither will you. But every single time you choose silence over a fight that was never actually worth winning, you are building the exact same composure that made an emperor surrounded by enemies impossible to provoke. Understanding this is not coldness, and it is not distance from the people who matter. It is the quiet beginning of becoming someone that nothing outside you can ever fully reach again.